Welcome to Voice It, a podcast showcasing people in the Clare Valley in the mid-north of South Australia who've started their own businesses from scratch and have turned them into success stories. This is a chance for them to tell you their story. I'm your host, Annabelle Homer.
Part of my job was to raid brothels, and that was
Wow.
a bit of an eye-opener for a young fella from the country. And yeah, the first time that happened, there was naked women running everywhere from room to room, and so that's Stormies for anyone that's ever been there.
Today you'll meet country copper and local businessman Mark Hill. He's been the local police officer in Clare for the past 25 years, keeping our community safe. And for the last 17 years, he's owned and operated the only driving school in the region, Hill Start Driving. In this episode, you'll hear Mark's journey from being a country copper, chasing stolen cars in the northern suburbs, going undercover in Adelaide brothels, to then leaving the excitement behind to become a country copper. Though he says Clare is a region where there's little crime, he still faced many challenges being a cop in a close-knit community. After 25 years and at the age of 52, Mark's ready for a change and about to embark on being a police prosecutor. Enjoy the journey with Senior Constable, First Class, Mark Hill.
Well, I was actually born in Uganda to a country copper, which is a little bit of a coincidence because it had nothing to do with what I ended up doing eventually. So brought up in, I say Ardrossan because I moved there at age 5.5, 6, 1976 we got there. After being born in Uganda and moving then to Saddleworth, where Dad was the last ever copper in Saddleworth, old police station there on the Barrier Highway next to the old post office. And then he moved to Riverton. He was one of the two first police officers based at the new Riverton police station, which is the one that's currently there now, opposite the hotel. So I had childhood memories of prisoners in the backyard. There's a cell in the backyard.
Of your house?
Yes, in the backyard. They used to stay there for periods of time, and it was quite scary actually, but of course they were never going to get out. But
Well, you'd hope not.
But Dad left police in 1976, and we moved to Ardrossan. Well, I say it's Ardrossan. It's actually on a farm between Ardrossan and Maitland.
So he was only 35,
Yeah.
so relatively young. So why did he leave?
Well, back then it was quite frustrating. Our family car was the police car, so the government paid the registration, and that was used as the police car. There was very limited operational equipment, so it was quite dangerous. The pubs were... Well, there was a stack of them, a lot more than there are now. Back then, in the early 70s, it was fairly lawless, I would say. There's nothing like what it is now when you can get kicked out of a hotel at the drop of a hat and get barred and so forth. But back then, basically, it was just fight after fight, and he was just banging his head against a brick wall trying to maintain law and order. And that's what I gathered. Anyway, I never complained about it, and I never really knew why, but that was just my gut feeling that he was sort of frustrated that it was a bit of a hiding to nothing really, and very little support. So he had an opportunity through Mum's parents to go farming over on York Peninsula, and that's basically where I say I grew up.
And your memories are more likely of him on the farm opposed to him being a copper?
Yeah, definitely. I have vague memories.
Apart from the prisoners in the backyard. And
the court used to run in the police station, but we lived out the back, and I really don't have a lot of recollection of his work because he was quite separate with his family life and his work life.
Is that why you became a police officer? Is it something that rubbed off on you, or was it totally random?
No, nothing at all like that. I seriously didn't know what I wanted to do when I left school, so I went to teachers college initially. That's not because I really wanted to become a teacher. I think in hindsight it was just because that's what everyone else did at that time, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. But I didn't even last the year out in teachers college, and I remember I was driving home to Ardrossan on the highway, and it was about at proof range. It was like a light bulb moment. It just hit me like a ton of bricks that I was meant to be a police officer. So from that point on, I just went for it and never looked back. And I was sort of 18 at that time, so I was eligible to apply.
What was the light bulb moment? I mean, there must have been a reason. There must have been a trigger point that made you think, yep, that's what I'm going to do?
I just felt like it suited me. There was certainly no influence from my father, that he didn't try and talk me into it at all.
What did he say when you said you wanted to do
He
it?
didn't say anything, actually, which worried me a bit. He said, "Are you sure?" Obviously, it wasn't a great experience for him, but having said that, there was full support that if that's what I wanted to do, then they were not going to try and discourage me from it. And it was all about the desire, and I just never looked back from that moment. You know, it's just like I just did what I had to do to join, and I was 18 at the time, so it was fairly young when I look back on it to be a police officer, and probably don't recommend it really, but that's just what happened back then.
Going into the force so young?
Yeah, you don't have a lot of life experience behind you, and you sort of got your eyes, opening your eyes to the world really, and it's a shocking way to find out a few things.
So can you tell me about what you had to do as part of your training?
So back then it was 12 months at the academy straight out. So being from the country, I lived there for the 12 months at the academy. You can't do that now. You have to find your own accommodation, much like you would if you were going to uni. But yeah, I stayed in there for 12 months and we had a lot of study. It was quite intense for that 12-month period. We had a little bit of time out of the academy in the field. So I did a bit of time at Port Adelaide on the road and up in Kadina, which was good. But yeah, so it was fairly full-on study for 12 months, and then from that time we graduated and as fully fledged coppers, which is slightly different to I think that they do it now. It's a sort of you get sworn in, but you're still part of your training.
So when it comes to training, is it physical training as well as mental training, psychological training, all of that and more?
A little bit, yeah, of everything. Yeah, we're driver training as well. There's operational safety. Yeah, but a lot of it is law, really, and not so much policy and procedure. It's mainly just law and getting your head around all that. Yeah, the physical side of it is still there to a certain extent, not as much as it used to be. There was a swimming pool back then. There's not the one there now. And we had to do 2K time trials all the time and stuff like that. But, I mean, back then there was height restrictions and it's a lot different. Now they'll accept...
Why was there height restrictions?
I guess it was for what they perceived as a need to probably be able to look after yourself, so to speak, in a physical way. But we've got that much operational safety equipment these days that you don't have to be big or particularly tough to...
Or fit.
Manage, yeah, or fit to manage yourself in a safe way. You deploy whatever it takes to defend yourself. The police missed out on a lot of really, really eligible and worthwhile people because of these ridiculous restrictions. It's a shame that they limited themselves like that, but they did. So
all right, so that was your training. So it was 12 months of training. These days it seems to be a lot more intensive and longer than that. Is that right?
Yeah, it is longer. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure of the specifics of it. I think it's an 18-month course, which is broken up into a period down at the academy, and then you graduate as a sworn police officer, but you're still in your training phase for another 6 months or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And as a probationary constable, and then you graduate as a fully fledged constable after that.
So when you graduate, it was a probationary constable. What are the rankings within the police force?
Cadet, probationary constable, senior constable, then there's senior constable first class or brevet sergeant, senior sergeant, and then you get into the commissioned officer ranks, which goes from inspector right up to commissioner. So there's quite a few. So
what are you at the moment?
Senior constable first class, which is a bit of a nothing type rank, to be honest with you. It used to be, actually. It did have some weight when I first attained that, but it sort of dropped out. Yeah, virtually I don't even say senior constable first class anymore. I just say senior constable. So.
Does that come down to experience, how you go up in the ranks, or do you have to...
It means qualified for sergeant. I actually qualified for senior sergeant back in 1996 when I was in the study mode and didn't really stop studying when I left the academy. So I became quite highly qualified early on and just stayed there when I found Clare, basically.
So tell me about, where did you go when you first graduated?
Yeah, so I did have a little stint in traffic initially, but that was standard. That was the radar section where basically no one wanted to work. And then I went to Hindmarsh. So I did 5 years at Hindmarsh, which is an old patrol base on Port Road, not there anymore. That was fantastic. So I was in my early 20s then and just loving life and couldn't get enough. The excitement back then was a different level to what I have now. It was especially night shifts.
Oh.
We used to just start work at 11 o'clock at night and basically drive straight to Mountsville Park and wait for the first stolen car to drive past and then just chase it. It just didn't take long on a Saturday night.
Was that a thrill, was it?
Yeah, well, it was.
It was, okay.
Yeah.
So how often did you chase stolen cars? Was this like a regular thing?
A lot back then, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was regular. And things have changed so much because we're talking like early 90s and things are a lot more accountable now than they used to be. Everything's recorded now and policy's changed a lot as well, so there's not as many car chases as there used to be.
So are you saying the fun's gone out of being a police officer?
I think it's gone out of everything these days, unfortunately. I'd hate to be a young person these days. There's so many rules and regulations. You basically, but that's the way they know it and don't know any different.
So you did the traffic gig, and then what happened after that?
So 5 years at High Marsh. In that 5 years, or during that 5 year, I did a 12-month secondment to what was called Operation Patriot, which is vice and gaming. So I was still fairly young at that time and went undercover. So part of my job was to raid brothels, and that was
Wow.
a bit of an eye-opener for a young fella from the country.
So how long did you do that for?
You could only do it for 12 months because you became too familiar and you had to move on. They always wanted fresh faces coming through there so that the brothel owners didn't know who you were, and you basically only raided one brothel each and that was it because you couldn't, then they knew you. So somewhere like Stormy's on Weymouth Street, that was like a fortress, to get through. And as a young copper who's fresh to the section, you got through the first gate because they didn't know your face, and then eventually you get right through to the top. Yeah, you get invited into a room and with this prostitute, and you're trying to get as much evidence as you can, like observations and so forth, and then when it comes time to drop your dacks, basically the alarms go off and you're caught, so you can't obviously go any further than that. And yeah, the first time that happened, there was naked women running everywhere from room to room. And so that was just at Stormy's for anyone that's ever been there.
Oh my God, Lee, this is fantastic. So you only raided Stormy's once? So Stormy's was your first raid? Yeah.
We did it a couple of times, but you couldn't be the person to get in. The business basically stops when they realise that they're being raided, and they'll get dressed and the guys sort of quite contrite, sitting there putting their clothes back on as well, and we get everyone's details and basically all the other coppers from downstairs, they're sitting in their cars, they all come up and help out with that. So
what was Stormy's doing that was
illegal?
Illegal?
Running a brothel was illegal. It still is. The legislation is that archaic, though. It's a bit of a joke. There's been that many. I've lost count of the times that they've tried to legalise prostitution, but it's still technically illegal to run a brothel anyway. You can get around it by doing escorts and stuff like that. But
was that a highlight of your career?
It was just one of many interesting things, I suppose. I had to try and hook up with prostitutes down Hindley Street too. There was a whole range of different things that we did. I'm not sure if it's a highlight, but it was memorable, put it that way.
Yeah. And was that the only undercover operation you did in your career?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Did you find it challenging to be undercover, or did it come naturally to you?
No, it didn't come naturally to me. It was way out of my comfort zone. I remember doing a Chinese brothel in the eastern suburbs one day, and I was in this room with this Asian lady, and she started giggling all of a sudden. I was thinking, hang on, I haven't taken my pants off or anything. Why's she laughing? And she's just giggling, hee hee hee, and she's pointed to my chest, and I looked down, and there was this red light showing through my shirt, so she could tell that I had a listening device under my shirt. So that was a bit embarrassing, but so little things like that, it was just memorable. After
that undercover operation, what happened after that?
Yeah, so that was just 12 months, and so I went back to High Marsh. It was about that time that I felt like I'd been at High Marsh for a long time. 5 years was busy, like really busy, and so I thought I always wanted to be country copper, so I put in for Port Pirie. I'm not sure why I chose Port Pirie, and I moved up there in 1990, end of 96. I just met Paula at that stage, and
Your wife,
that actually that was in '94, but we'd sort of realised that we were going to stay together, and so.
And you met her in Adelaide?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I met her at Lenny's actually. It was for the.
It wasn't a brothel, so no offence, Paula.
Right, that was So I met her through friends. Actually, a lot of people knew from the country know Mark Cooney, who was a mate of mine from Ardrossan, and how I met Paula because they were sharing a house together in Clare, and I used to keep in contact with him, and she was his housemate, and so it's interesting. My best mate was living with my future wife before I met her.
So did Paula move up to Port Pirie to be with you?
She did. Yeah, she worked in the National Bank in Port Pirie for a little while, and we're still really connected with Clare because her parents lived here, and we used to come down here, and I was playing football up there, but had seen a few games down here and really, really liked the place, and never ever dreamt that I'd work here for some reason. It was just a smaller station, and I don't know, I just didn't feel like I was going to get the opportunity. And all of a sudden, I was down here watching a game of footy one day, and the secretary, who was the sergeant at the police station, said, "Oh, there's a spot here. Why don't you put in for it?" So that was another light bulb moment. I thought, yeah, why don't I? So I got out of Port Pirie after about 20 months and came here in 1997. Played, I think, 6 games of footy for the last part of that 97 season.
Is this North Clare?
North Clare,
yep.
Which was the last time they won a premiership. So so I was lucky enough to sneak in on that one. And, yeah, never looked back since. So I've been over 25 years now that I've been here. So,
what has been the worst thing that you've had to go out to see or do as part of your police work? I mean, what's been the most challenging, almost confronting thing you've had to experience?
I never really liked dealing with drug-affected people because they weren't themselves, and it was really confronting because they had no idea what they were doing, and really it was a bit frightening at times because they were unpredictable, but just the things that they said and did, they probably wouldn't if they were not drug affected. So yeah, whenever you deal with drug affected people, but obviously there's been fatal crashes, and a couple of them sort of stick in your memory. Yeah, I feel like I could go on all day about stories, to be honest, but although Clare's fairly quiet, to be honest, in terms of police work, more than it used to be, and it's been very quiet and quite civilised in the last 8 to 10 years, I would say. Laws have changed. There's been a lot of things change in relation to dry zones and liquor licensing and traffic, hoon legislation and impounding and instant loss of licences and the way young people behave. And
going back on the drug situation, is that an issue in Clare still?
It's a question I get asked a lot. Is there a drug problem in Clare? And my answer is no. That's based on my definition of a drug problem, which is basically, does it affect other people? I think if someone chooses to use drugs themselves, no matter what they are, and they can afford to pay their way and don't affect anyone else, then that's their personal choice. But when they have to break into a house or a car to support their habit, when the drug affects their behaviour and they do stuff that they shouldn't, or creates crime, domestic violence, property damage, and it starts to affect other people, then that's what I would call a drug problem. Then, yeah, I don't see much of that, to be honest. Not so much anymore.
Have you been confronted with a life-threatening situation?
Oh, not really.
You had to draw your weapon? Or
No, not other person. You shoot the odd injured animal, of course, in the country. But I remember a time in Adelaide when I was sitting in the car. I was in Angle Park, and it doesn't sound much, but when I heard that there was a copper in America that shot that Australian Justine Diamond,
yes.
I think she was,
yeah,
who'd called the police and simply went up to the car to tell them what was going on and got shot. I could relate to that because I finished a job in Angle Park, and I'm just sitting in the police car writing, and potentially there was a person around that was causing trouble, and although we couldn't find them, and I thought that he'd just stepped up to the side of the car and was going to shoot me out of the blue, and that was the time when I thought I was going to die.
Yeah, what happened?
Well, nothing really. It was just a similar situation to that Justine Diamond situation, where it wasn't a threatening situation at all, but I felt like I was. People ask me what's the hardest thing you've had to do as a copper, and the answer is to to book a very good mate for drink driving, and that's in comparison to a lot of other things. Delivering death measures is never very nice, and different things. But yeah, to be in a situation where you've got to book someone that you know and like so much, and for drink driving, where they lose their license for 6 months and it affects their business and obviously their hip pocket, and I didn't want to be in that situation, but it was either my reputation or his license that had to go. So,
and they would understand eventually.
Eventually, yeah. He rang me a couple of times the next day and apologised for putting me in that situation. But at the time, he wasn't very happy. He thought that we were mates, and that what was I doing? It was my fault that.
Yeah, well, that's probably the trickiest thing about being a country copper, is that you're having to put yourself in those situations where you're dealing with mates and dealing with people that you know.
Yeah, it's a fine line. You really got to. I've learnt a lot over the years that it's a fine line. You can't be too much on one side and not enough on the other. You've got to just tread that line. If you let people do what they want to do and don't come down hard when you need to, then you lose control and people run amok. If you go too heavy the other side, become a little bit officious or too heavy, then you lose respect and you don't get the backup and the help that you might need one day. So you've really got to be careful.
What happens when you're confronted with a situation where, say, for example, a child has passed away in an accident, and the child is friends of yours as well? I mean, how do you deal with that situation?
Yeah, well, you have to deal with it, and because that's your job, I feel like as the country copper, you are relied upon to take charge and be the leader, and people expect that of you, and you can't shy away from it. I think if you're tasked to a job like that where there's so much trauma and grief, they see you arrive, I think that you would be expected to be their rock that they can lean on and rely on. And so I've seen that a couple of times since I've been here. And yeah, I just think that's part of your job. You can't shy away from it. They look for guidance from you, and as hard as it is for us, they don't see us as someone who would be affected by it. They just see you as a uniform and someone that should be able to take charge. I take my hat off to Peter Shearer, to be honest. He's gone through as a leader at the local Catholic school. He's had to deal with a number of tragedies, which he's just stood up and been that rock for the community. So that's, I sort of take a bit out of that, actually. As a copper, you've got to be that rock as well.
Do you get emotional at all in private, or do you just separate the two?
Yeah, I get to separate the two. Yeah, definitely. It's not something... I've never been one to talk to Paula about work when I get home. As much as they encourage it, they think that it's good for you to express yourself and so forth. But I find that it's counterproductive. I just don't want to relive it. I'd just rather block it off and not worry about it. And if I do start talking to her about it at home, she asks me questions, and it just makes it worse. So better just to leave it to myself, and I deal with it.
So she's learnt to stop asking questions, I guess.
I've learnt to stop sharing with her, to be honest. So, and I think it's better for her. A lot of people expect Paula to know what's going on in their dealings with me, and if they see her down the street, I think it's not fair on her if she does know what I've done at work. And if someone asks her or expects her to know something and runs something by her, she can legitimately look at them in bewilderment and have no idea what they're talking about, rather than feel awkward about it.
Yeah.
So I don't share it with her, and I deal with it. And I just think it's important as a copper, because who else are they going to call, for guidance when you come across a tragedy, whether it be someone in a car accident or any other death for that matter. It's got to be the local copper, I think.
On a Friday afternoon, most people would knock off and go to the pub and have a drink. I presume you have had to sacrifice all that type of business. You can't do that. You can't be seen publicly to be doing that. Has that been a challenging thing?
Absolutely. Our roster works very badly for us. It's one weekend off every 4, and every second Friday and Saturday night we work late, 6 to 2:30 shift, or sometimes later. So the social life is a bit non-existent at times. But yeah, then when you do go out, people look at you funny, like, what are you doing here? Like, shouldn't you be at work? It's like, well, yeah, every now and then we get a time off.
Can you truly relax in a social setting?
No, not at all. No, I don't think I can. I feel like if I park my car at the front of the pub and went in for a couple of squashes, and then walked out, got in and drove off, I'd be drink driving in the eyes of a lot of people because I'd been at the pub.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you've got to be really accountable. And I learnt that early on because when I was in Adelaide, I'll have to admit, I wasn't perhaps as good as I should have been. And you're a little bit more anonymous, you see. You can get away with a lot of stuff. And so it wasn't unusual to have a few drinks and drive. And I sort of brought that up to Clare initially, that mindset, and learnt very quickly that you're a lot more accountable for what you do and the way you behave. So yeah, that was all straight away out the door. So
why did you start up a driving school? You'd think you'd be busy enough being a police officer.
Yeah, well, driving school was not actually the first thing that came to my mind. It all started because I was a shift worker. I had a lot of spare time during the day, and sometimes we have 5 days off, and it's part of our roster. And I'm not one to sit around doing nothing. I just can't handle it. So I did a few TAFE courses to spend some time. This is in early 2000s, and one was a accounting to trial balance course, which ended up coming in handy when I became treasurer of the cricket club and so forth. And then I did one called Researching Business Opportunities, because I was literally looking for something to do, but I didn't know what it was going to be. So researching business opportunities, to me, it was it sounded good. So I started it, and you learn a lot about business and so forth. But there was one line that I read in a textbook that, again, it was a light bulb moment, and it was, think of something that you're good at. And I thought, oh, yeah, now I'm stuffed. I couldn't think for the life of me what I was good at. And then, again, it just dawned on me, hang on, I can drive. And then I thought, yeah, I can. Doug Hanley was the driving instructor in Clare at the time, and he actually is a very youthful man at the time because he was a lot older than what he looked. And I didn't think for a minute that he was due to retire, but I saw him because he used to meet the people in the police station car park, and I saw him there one day, and I just got chatting with him, and he said, yeah, I'm looking to retire and move on, and he said, you should take over. So from there, it just went from there. So He'll Start Driving wasn't a name I can claim to coming up with. It was one of my colleagues actually come up with that name. But so that was early 2005, and I became qualified in July 2005, so a bit over 17 years ago. Doug used to do my testing for a while, so you need to be a different trainer has to train the person to pass a test.
Oh, okay.
And I was training them up, and Doug was testing them for me until such time as I got qualified to do the testing, and then I found someone else to do the training. And so Doug retired, and myself and this other guy worked together. He trained them and I test them. I also did the CBT training, which is what they used to call logbook. It's a competency-based training course, a lot more thorough, longer way of doing it, but it's definitely cut out for people that don't want a pressure of a test. Quite unique to South Australia, I think, and it was designed back in the day when you only had to have your L's for 6 months before you got your P's, which is really not that long, to be honest. It's 12 months now. You only had to have 50 hours of driving, which now you have to have 75. So not a lot of people do the CBT anymore, but there's still certainly a call for it.
So you must be getting clients from all over, not just the local area.
Yeah, we are. Driver training is something that's hard to get into now because of the way the government have it set up. You really, really need to be passionate and determined to do it, otherwise it becomes too hard. And so there's more driver trainers that are leaving than they're actually joining. And we get people coming up from Adelaide, the Barossa, up north, because they can't get lessons anywhere else. So,
People coming up from Adelaide?
Yeah, and northern suburbs, and certainly the Barossa, Udunda.
So you're in great need of instructors, Mark.
Yeah, we've got one coming through at the moment. He's quite keen. He's just getting his final assessments done through the government, and he'll join the team very soon, we hope. So we've got Pat and John that have been going at it for quite a while. They're ready to give it away. So it's just a bit of a transition we're trying to work through at the moment, and I'm trying to move on myself in some ways. But,
yes, well, let's talk about that because you're on long service leave at the moment because... Would you say you're done being a police officer? Yeah,
I've always said I didn't want to work shift work after 50. Unfortunately, that was 2 years ago now. So,
oh, you're only 52.
Yes, it is young, isn't it?
Yeah, it is young. Yeah.
So I've got another 8 years in the job, and I don't want to do it on the road, and certainly working shift work. So I have, become recently qualified to join the prosecution section, which I thought that I would definitely be working in by now because it's been a long process, and I became qualified at halfway through the year. But yeah, this for
So you're qualified, you just need to start working in that department.
Yes.
And why aren't you working in that department?
Unfortunately, almost to the day that the course finished, SAPOL realised that there was a dwindling number of police on the road, and mainly in the metropolitan area. So they put a stop to any transfers and movements, basically. So certainly couldn't go from an operational role that I'm in at the moment to a prosecution role, which is non-operational, because we just didn't have the numbers to support it. And it's all a little bit of a flow on from COVID, because the academy shut down for a period of time and there was no cadets coming through. And then there was a period where they couldn't even attract people to join the police. It was like any other industry, just couldn't get enough workers. So yeah, there wasn't enough people applying for the job.
Has that changed now?
It has recently changed, and they're getting a few courses through at the moment. But it's best to keep up with the attrition rate, which is people coming up to the end of their career wanting to retire. So yeah, the timing of it wasn't great for me, and because I mentally had set myself to not be working on the road, I really felt it was time to take some long service leave. So that's what I've been doing for quite a while now.
Why do you want to do it?
Actually did the course back in 95. It's something that I've always wanted to do, but that's when Clare sort of popped up and it became a lifestyle choice. And so the reason I've been here for so long is because I love it here. And I don't really want to leave, but I would be prepared to work elsewhere, but still would maintain a house here. And
so you never wanted to move back to Adelaide and, become a detective or staff force officer or...
I grew out of that. Yeah, life was too good in Clare, to be honest. It's a great place, and so we're happy. And yeah, it wasn't any good for my career. Basically, I was fairly highly qualified early on in the mid-90s, and potentially I could have become a sergeant at that time, but lifestyle just took over, and family, and
you've got two girls.
Yeah,
Emily and Georgia.
May, yeah. So they're 24 and 22.
What does Paula think of your change in career path?
Yeah, Paula's never been one to have an opinion, or as long as I'm happy, she's happy, basically. So she's just happy to go with the flow and can understand how I would want to change. Hopefully she's noticed a difference since I've been on long service leave. I'm a little bit easier to live with, I hope. So.
Do a lot of people, or do a lot of police officers who become a police prosecutor, do they eventually become defence lawyers or barristers, etc.?
Yeah, they do. A lot do. It's not something that I would ever want to do. I struggle to understand the concept of representing someone that's done the wrong thing, and I know that there's reasons for it, human rights and all the rest of it, but it just doesn't sit with me. I'm happy to be on the police side. Reflecting
back, for someone who's listening to this who might be considering going into the force, what's your piece of advice?
Oh, I'd recommend it 100%. It's a job that everybody could surely find something they like in the job. You're employed by the same organisation, and yet there's a range of different options and opportunities that you've got at your beck and call. Here's me saying this and I can't get what I want at the moment, but yeah, there's so much more variety. I would recommend it for sure. There's a lot of cynical coppers out there that have been disillusioned and negative, and I've never wanted to be like that, and they're not the ones you want to listen to, because it is a good job, and I would 100% encourage it. It's actually really good pay as well, and the conditions and so forth.
I was going to say, is it good pay? Is it still good pay?
Yeah, it is, yeah. And that's based on the association advocating for us, and based on police pay in other states. And well, I don't feel guilty about working in Clare and getting paid so much for it, but because I don't...
Don't say that, Mark.
I felt like...
You've earned it. You've earned it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I felt like I've done the hard yards early on. And if other people want to come and work at Clare, well, then they can too. So it is challenging. Like, you're 24/7, really. I mean, I don't mind it. I get phone calls at home, and you get people knocking on your door sometimes if they can't get through to the police. And let's say the phone diverts to Piri, and they don't want to talk to anyone from Piri. They want to talk to someone from Clare. So they'll give me a ring. I don't mind it, even though I'm not working. It's a little bit of a badge of honour that they feel like they can contact me and see me as someone approachable.
Do you get those threatening phone calls?
Yeah, I have had. Yeah, I've had a lot of stuff go on, actually. There was a some people wouldn't probably remember it, but there was some rather large graffiti written about me on the north-facing wall of what's now the Beyond Bank, that sort of on the side of the tennis courts there.
On the main drag there.
Yeah, I came to work one day and there was some quite large red graffiti written about me and my...
What did it say?
It said, Mark Hill, 4 Agnes Street, FUKS, his own kids. Spelled it wrong, but got the message through. Yeah, that was a bit awkward because I didn't have anyone really that I didn't think that I got on with. I think the main thing about being a country copper is respect, and that works both ways. I think if I show someone disrespect and then I don't deserve respect myself, it doesn't matter if I'm the police officer or not. I need to respect everybody for who they are. They've got just as much right to walk on the earth as anyone else. Doesn't matter their background or how much money they've got or whether they're employed or whether they use drugs. Or that's the number one thing. And so I've always made sure that I respect everybody for who they are, and I feel like I've got it back in most cases.
Well, if that's the worst that's happened, that's pretty good, really.
Yeah, it could be worse.
Yeah.
I've had a few eggs thrown at the house. But yeah, again, that's just...
Kids weren't threatened at all or anything like that?
No, the kids never complained about anything.
Did you find the culprit?
I think I do know who it is, but I won't be able to prove it, but that's all right.
So how long ago was that?
It was probably 6 or 7 years ago, maybe.
Oh, okay.
It didn't last for long. I have to thank those that got rid of it pretty quickly. So,
to be a successful country cop, what qualities should you have?
Yeah, you do have to be very impartial. I think it's important that you don't too friendly with certain people. You can be perceived as being a bit biased and taking sides, but that respect thing is the biggest for me. I think being accountable. It's like a tradie. You know, if you're working as a tradesman in a country town, you want to do a good job for your own reputation and a bit of pride. And I think it's important that you remember that you're going to be remembered for different things and why not give it everything you can.
Well, thank you so much for your service. 25 years. It's good for you that you're taking on this next step, but it's a bit sad for the community, I think, losing you on the streets of Clare. But I appreciate, and I'm sure everybody in the Clare Valley community appreciates everything that you've done.
It's great. My pleasure, and thanks for having me. I felt that I wasn't really worthy of doing this interview, but hopefully I've given you something.
Oh, definitely worthy. Definitely worthy. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark, for sharing your story, and good luck on the police prosecution path. If you enjoyed his story, please share with your friends and family. If you want to find out more about me and Voice It, check out my website, voiceit.me. I'm a former ABC radio journalist who now specialises in podcasting, public speaking training, and I also do audio memoirs for families. So call me if you'd like to get in touch. And while I've got you, if you're interested in sponsoring a Voice It episode, please let me know. I'll send you all the details. It's another great way of promoting your business. Catch you soon for another episode of the Voice It podcast.